Hello, welcome back. Tara Kabatoff here. We are going to be looking at the difference between emotional intelligence versus emotional attunement. And this only became evident for me recently when I watched a video on social media of a man, maybe around my age, maybe a little bit younger, talking about a situation where his daughter, who was about 6 years old or so, had told the mother that she was being triggered and that her mental health is at risk. So the father had been talking about this on a podcast. He told the story. He then mentioned he sat his daughter down and told her that he never wants her to say the word trigger again or any mention of mental health. Basically, he was telling her that she comes from a very highly emotionally intelligent family, a very good family, and she has a lot to be grateful for. And I get it. I understand how difficult it must be being a parent, raising a child. However, what caught my attention here was the fact that the child, a very young child at that, was trying to express her feelings in some kind of way, and she had been shut down. So sure enough, I went to the comments. I read the comments to see where everyone was at, getting the gauge of the climate, if you will, of everyone's comments. The majority of people were in his favor. And I completely understand when children or teenagers or young adults sensationalize words without really understanding the context or what they mean. However, someone at that age truly, most likely, doesn't understand how to express themselves. So they probably are using words that they have heard and putting it into some kind of context to express themselves in some kind of way. But what happens when a child is dismissed in any kind of way, that child is going to grow up later in life feeling rejected, feeling silenced, feeling that they're not good enough, that it's not okay to express their emotions. And they may even grow up to not understand how to articulate how they feel. Now, it's not a fault of the parents. Look, we are all learning, we are all growing, we are all trying to figure out this story of life, unravel from the complexities that we have deeply ingrained within ourselves from a long time ago. However, I feel this particular matter is very important to understand and to understand the difference between emotional intelligence versus emotional attunement. Now, I'm going to describe where emotional intelligence came from, and also I feel it is a segue of allowing for us to go deeper into ourselves. I've talked about this before many times about being in the year, the 2000s from the thousands. Now, if you want to look at it from maybe a numerological standpoint, being in the 2000s does have a signature of the feminine, also does allow us to be more receptive and more emotionally attuned. If you want to look at it that way, if you are not interested in numerology and patterns, completely fine, is something that I like to look at. But just basic observation of looking at what's happening and what's unfolding with our evolution. Looking back at the early 1900s, for example, when people were or even before, when people were very, very removed from their emotions. Now, if you have or have not seen the documentary, The Century of Self, if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend watching it. I did a review on my channel as well, but it will also help paint the picture of the context of our process of evolution, of having our emotions very suppressed, not being attuned with our deeper self, and the repercussions that have been created as a result. Now, as we move forward into this process of evolution, some will say a spiritual evolution, some will say an awakening, some will say a wholeness. Whatever you subscribe to, whatever you believe in, we are in a process right now of rapid transformation, rapid awakenings, rapid discovering of self, and also connecting with our whole being. And in order for us to get there, we must understand our emotional landscape. And I talk about this a lot on my channel because this was one of the components that I had not connected with and I had deeply, grossly suppressed for most of my life. And when I went through my dark night of the soul, when I started connecting more with my deeper self, I realized how little I understood about my emotional self, and also how much my emotions were running the show unconsciously, all my impulses, my reactions. And also, the more I've worked on myself, I have realized, I've gained a greater level of emotional attunement, but now I now understand how important this really is. Now, as I mentioned, emotional intelligence is the segue to emotional attunement, but they're very different. And I'm going to explain. Also, if you would like to go a little bit deeper into this, I have an article over at the Odyssey of Self that I published recently on this very topic. I will leave a link below. You can follow it through. But emotional intelligence, also known as EI, was first coined in around 1990 by Peter Salovey and John D. Mayer as a form of social intelligence that involves the ability to monitor one's own and others' feelings and emotions, to discriminate among them, and to use this information to guide one's thinking and action. Emotional intelligence then gained significant popularity in around 1995 when the publication of Daniel Goleman's book, Emotional Intelligence: Why It Can Matter More Than IQ, became widely talked about. And Goldman argued that it was not cognitive intelligence that guaranteed business success, but emotional intelligence. He described emotionally intelligent people as those with these 4 characteristics. They were good at understanding their own emotions, which is self-awareness. They were good at managing their emotions, self-management. They were empathetic to the emotional drives of other people, social awareness. They were good at handling other people's emotions, which are part of social skills. Now, emotional intelligence clearly is very, very important. And I do recall in around 2008 or so in my corporate career, EI was talked about prevalently. It was pretty much introduced into a lot of, or most of, top corporate cultures as a way to mitigate and navigate difficult situations in the workplace. It was very commonly spoke about within a lot of publications and literature, mostly predominantly in the workforce. Now, this can be also taken into any kind of social landscape, if it is with relationships, family, peers, etc. Emotional intelligence allows us to regulate our emotions. It gives us an opportunity to pause and reflect on how we are reacting rather than allowing our emotions basically override our reactions or our perceptions or how we're behaving. So emotional intelligence was spoken about as being more valuable than IQ. We came from previously and is still part of our society in all honesty, but having a high intellect, being very smart, was very well sought after. Knowledge was king at that time, and it was very important for a lot of people to rise in the ranks of social status, academia, and the like. But emotional intelligence was missing from this equation. And without emotional intelligence, well, relationships can fall apart. Relationships can be very explosive. We can lose good connections. We won't be able to navigate the room well or read the room well or read people. We won't be able to draw the best out of people. We won't be able to understand the clues and the cues that reside beneath the surface in order for us to advance in certain ways. So emotional intelligence is extremely valuable when you work with it and when you can incorporate it into your practice, if it is with interpersonal relationships, with navigating life, or especially in the career force. So there are a lot of depths and dynamics to this, obviously, but where this can take us is emotional attunement. Now, there's a very fine line between these two, but they're very different. The difference is connection. Now, the emotional attunement allows an individual to understand another person from a very deep place. When you're able to attune sensitively and deeply with another person, you can draw information from them. You can also help them feel comfortable and safe. You can also pick up on a lot of their cues and their clues, such as facial expressions, such as eye movement, such as body postures, such as word tone. These very subtle clues and cues that come from another person are a wealth of information for understanding other people. So emotional attunement will take the relationship dynamics into a deeper, more connected place. Now, emotional intelligence, like I said, is very important. But if we also have not understood the emotional depths within ourselves, doing deeper work, getting into some of the shadow work, getting into some of this deep unconscious, subconscious work, working with our own emotions, working through our own traumas, etc., we will only be able to understand others from the place that we are at. So if we haven't gone into our depths, if we haven't invested into ourselves, and it's an ongoing process, by the way, it's not just investing into ourselves for a couple of years. This is deep attunement within ourselves. When we go deep within ourselves, we will be able to understand the depths within another person. And I've mentioned this also before, and I'm sure you are aware of this. This is very common understanding, especially in certain spiritual practices, Buddhism, for example. The more compassion that we gain for ourselves by going through our pain and into the depths of ourselves allows us to have greater compassion for those around us. Now, compassion comes with attunement. Compassion comes with softness. It comes with gentle listening. It comes with being able to draw out information from people, creating a safe environment for others to feel safe within so their body can relax, so that they can learn to express themselves more, so they can learn to be themselves fully in those specific environments. So you can tell the difference between these two. It's very subtle, but also very powerful. I feel where we are going with the process of evolution is naturally going to take us into emotional attunement. You may also feel that you are maybe more emotional than usual, or maybe more emotional than you have in the past. This is because I feel the process of evolution that we're in, where we naturally have to go into the depths of our emotions. We have to naturally connect with our feelings and senses in order for us to evolve, in order for us to become more real, and in order for us to become more whole. This is going to also allow us to become more attuned with others because we will be more attuned with ourselves. And the attunement factor will allow us to sense others deeply without even having to have dialogue in some cases. And I feel this whole landscape of attunement can be also positioned into the body attunement, tuning in with our body, our body's messages, our body's responses, right? So attunement is going to be the next level and the next stage of evolution. And it's very gentle. It's very subtle. It's an inner knowing. It's an inner sensation. And it allows us to connect with our outer environment, with relationships, with the world on that same level. So I'm sure this father was trying his best, doing his best. I'm sure he came from the best place possible for himself and where he's at. But we also have to be very aware of how we as people respond to certain situations and to certain interactions. And if children are not allowed to express how they feel, even if they don't know how to fully express it, but if they're not given a place to feel safe to try to express how they're feeling, they're going to shut down, and later in life, it's going to create a lot of complications for them. Doesn't mean that it's a dead end, of course, because I'm sure, as you know, everything is changeable, and attunement is going to allow us to rewrite some of these scripts within ourselves so that we can rewrite our story, thus create a greater impact in our future and the world around us. And again, if you want to go a little bit deeper into the article over at the Odyssey of Self, there is a link in the description area below. And I'm wishing you all the best on your journey and beyond, as always. Until next time, take care.